Ladies and gentlemen, very good morning. It's indeed a great pleasure once again to participate in this great conference that was organized by Datamatics. We all know that the world is changing at an incredible speed, and one of the fundamental drivers is digital transformation. Digitalization, or the integration of technology in economic activities, is a global practice that is happening at different pace and different speed, with various objectives ranging from lowering costs to simulating innovation, improving services, generating efficiencies, or even improving access to data and creating knowledge. Failure to adaptation simply means out of business. Recent thermostat collapse is a clear example of this saying. Unfortunately, it's a one-way traffic. Digital transformation in traditional business, or e-commerce, represents a global paradigm shift that is changing the rules of the game. I'm sure most of you came across this recent report of the shutdown of 7,000 retail stores in the US in the first 6 months of this year due to several factors, among which is online competition. Let's look at some numbers related to e-commerce. Despite the slow average of global economic growth, which is between 2 and 3% in most countries, e-commerce growth as a global average is set at around 24%. B2C e-commerce market is expected to reach $3.2 trillion by 2020. Within the same time frame, B2B e-commerce is expected to reach $6.7 trillion, accounting for about 8% of the global GDP. Other statistics indicate that B2B is around $8 trillion. Today, we have around 2 billion online shoppers worldwide, and the number is mounting. Let's look at some numbers in Arab countries. MENA region is considered as one of the fastest growing regions in e-commerce, with 25% growth rate, with around 100 million digital buyers. E-commerce in MENA region is valued around $60 to $70 billion. B2C in Arab countries is estimated around $30 and $35 billion. There is no data about B2B e-commerce in Arab countries, but we assume that it's of the same volume of the B2C business. Although global average of B2B is double or triple the amount of B2C, Arab countries are still lagging behind in B2B business. Cross-border B2C e-commerce between Arab countries is reported to have increased to around 3% between 2014 and 2020. B2B in Middle East and Africa is estimated to be around $22 billion and is expected to reach $26 billion by 2020. In general, Arab B2C e-commerce constitutes 1.5% of Arab GDPs, compared with the global average of around 4%. The opportunity lies in the potential volume of Arab e-commerce in the coming 10 years, according to our recent study that was published in the Arab League, which estimates Arab e-commerce to rise to more than $500 billion. Indeed, this huge potential market space means significant and promising business investment opportunities. However, we argue this requires comprehension and understanding of e-commerce drivers. I'll highlight here 11 foundational elements we have been advising Arab governments with that need to be attended by policymakers to build and support e-commerce development. I always tend to be saying that if you don't know where you are going, then it wouldn't really matter where and what you will be actually ending up with. The point is that without a clear strategic framework with clearly set objectives, you can't reach to the desired state, nor you achieve the desired outcomes. It's like chasing the clouds. So this is where the proposed ecosystem starts from. It pleased to devise a national strategy that sets up the legal and regulatory instruments to promote e-commerce growth, as well as addressing the challenges and gaps. The policy should also address the mechanisms to mandate the foreign direct investments in e-commerce platforms and ensure an equal level playing field in local markets. China is a shining example in setting strategies. It was able to uplift online retail sales to more than $1.3 trillion in 2018. Indeed, China didn't get there by coincidence. Moving on to the second element is related to encouraging and incentivizing online businesses. Malaysia and Indonesia announced multiple incentives to support e-commerce and startups in particular. Their programs included tax exemption and investment opportunities. The third element is about digital education and training programs that puts emphasis on addressing the shortage of skills and growth in existing labor force. US, India, and China have addressed this need with online programs designed to raise awareness, productivity, and creativity, and also promote entrepreneurship. The fourth element is about the need for governments to plan for strategic investments in selected e-commerce foundations that accelerates the e-commerce practices. US and China has been investing heavily in high-tech companies, and many countries around the world have been following the same path. Amazon and Alibaba today dominate 80% of the global market share. I wouldn't really think that these companies would have reached to this market share without some kind of support from their governments. Fifth, it's also important for governments to support and finance micro, small, and medium companies, as well as startup companies, as these companies provide a major share in employment opportunities. Indonesian governments, for example, anticipate e-commerce contribution to create 26 million full-time jobs by 2022. In Estonia, another example, SMEs' expected contribution is around 66% of total exports, providing 75% of employment opportunities. Many countries in the EU introduced programs to digitalization of SMEs. According to official statistics, MSMEs in EU provide more than 66% of employment opportunities. The sixth element is related to ensuring the availability of basic e-commerce subsystems and necessary infrastructure such as e-payment and shipping services. In Arab countries, 70 to 80% of digital buyers still prefer cash-on-delivery options. This is a major drawback and challenge to e-commerce in Arab countries on the long run. Governments need to have particularized regulations and policies to preserve trust and confidence in digital financial systems. Besides, shipping and fulfillment remains a key aspect for the success of e-commerce businesses. Logistics as a sector is not recognized as an industry in Arab region, not limited to e-commerce. Governments need to address logistics as a backbone and key driver to economic and industrial growth. The seventh element is about e-government programs such as e-procurement, which is seen to provide great opportunity to leverage e-commerce. According to OECD, a saving of 1% through digital procurement systems may represent savings of around 43 billion euros per year in member countries. The eighth element is related to government's need to pay attention to modernizing consumer protection laws and provide at least the same level of protection that is available with conventional systems and transactions. EU has developed and enforced very matured series of regulations that offer higher levels of consumer protection and allocated a huge budget of around 200 million euros for the years 2014 2014 and 2020. Just for the record, trust is listed as the main e-commerce barrier in Middle East and African countries, according to a report that was published in 2018. The ninth element, it's also crucial to work on reducing border clearance procedures, especially those related to cross-border trade. South Korea, a major trader in global economy, introduced several initiatives to reform border management and customs regulations. Clearance, for example, of imports take around 1.5 hours. Clearance of exports take around 2 minutes or less. EU has also launched several initiatives to cut down barriers with a strategic objective to increase exports between member countries to 66%. Cross-border e-commerce in East Asian countries reaches 53% compared to less than 3% in the Arab world, meaning that for each $2 increase in foreign trade, $1 is coming from e-commerce. It's also important to highlight here the issue about existing customs processes worldwide in general and in Arab region in more specific, and that the fact about customs processes that they have been developed originally and designed for large-scale industrial shipments. There is a need to simplify clearance processes of e-commerce shipments with predefined duty and tax fees, especially for those of low-value shipments. Shipping a pen and a book should be different than shipping furniture. The 10th element is about the international players that are actually taking over local e-commerce traffic. Governments need to support national products and services on e-commerce platforms to ensure a fair competition with the international players. Singapore is a great example in this regard. Its efforts in this field resulted in huge exports reaching to 175% of their GDP, compared to 20% in the US, for example. And the Philippines government has also been supporting its industry by helping local players in venturing to digital marketplace, despite the challenges to compete with the international players. Last but not least, the 11th element is about ensuring a reliable and affordable internet access. Connectivity is the backbone for e-commerce development. Internet is and must be seen as the main vehicle for e-commerce growth. Although internet infrastructure in Arab countries is uneven, one common fact about it is that it's very costly. We believe this area needs specific policy attention, as it can not only increase productivity, but the appetite of businesses to transform into digital and uplift national economies to new levels. I'll conclude my presentation with some thoughts. E-commerce indeed is offering a new economic paradigm where its expansion on national context has the potential to impact the overall economy. As a general point, policy makers still view e-commerce merely as a platform for buying and selling. They are looking at part of the big picture. E-commerce, if strategized, it can catalyze countries' economic growth with massive contribution to national economies. Without deeper understanding and comprehension of e-commerce drivers, it won't be possible to support the proliferation and advancement of e-commerce in Arab countries. With the speed we are witnessing technology developments around us today and the snowballing figures of digital buyers in the Arab countries, the potential of e-commerce remains gigantic. Thank you very much.